Every toxic family system assigns roles: the caretaker, the hero, the lost one, the golden child, the truth teller. And then there's the scapegoat, the one who absorbs what no one else will hold, the one who carries the tension, the anger, the unspoken pain, the one who gets labeled, blamed, and misunderstood, not because they're broken, but because they reflect what others refuse to face. This is Born Tired, where survival meets healing, a podcast for those of us who grew up in survival mode but are ready to heal and speak our truth. I'm Irene, a cycle breaker learning what peace feels like after years of survival. Every episode is an invitation to rest inside your truth, to feel seen, and to remember you were never alone. This is what it sounds like when silence finally breaks. Before we begin, I want to share a gentle reminder. This episode includes stories and reflections about domestic violence, childhood trauma, and abuse. Please listen in a way that feels safe for you. If at any point you need to pause or step away, honor that. Your well-being matters more than finishing the episode. If you or someone you know is in danger or needs support, you can reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 or visit thehotline.org for free. Confidential help is available 24 hours a day. And if you're listening from outside the U.S., you can find international hotlines and local resources at findahelpline.com. You are not alone. Take care of yourself while you listen. There's a moment in healing when something finally clicks. When you realize you weren't who they said you were. That the version of you everyone pointed to, the difficult one, the emotional one, the problem, that was never your true self. It was projection, a displacement. A mirror you were forced to hold so everyone else could avoid looking at themselves. In families like that, someone has to carry the blame. And if you speak up, if you cry too loudly, if you ask questions, if your reactions disrupt the illusion of everything's fine, you become the easy target, the scapegoat. It's a quiet kind of exile, being blamed without being understood. Seen, but never really seen. And when that story follows you long enough, it doesn't just hurt. It starts to feel like truth. You begin confusing guilt with identity. You mistake silence for peace. And survival becomes the only language your body knows. When you grow up as a scapegoat, you don't just internalize blame. You organize your entire life around avoiding it. You over-explain before anyone asks. You apologize for things that don't need apologies. You make yourself smaller so no one can accuse you of taking up too much space. You learn to read moods before words because staying ahead of emotional shifts feels safer than being honest. Your nervous system stays on high alert and your body scans rooms before the mind catches up. You notice tone changes, sighs, pauses, because once upon a time, those things decided whether you were safe or not. And then one day, something shifts. Someone sees you differently, maybe for the first time. They don't flinch at your feelings. They don't need you to be quieter, smaller, easier. And it doesn't make sense at first because when you survive through shame, kindness feels unfamiliar and love feels suspicious. That's where the unlearning begins. In the moment you finally ask yourself, what if I was never the bad one? This episode is about the truth behind the scapegoat role and how it shapes the way we see ourselves long after we've left the chaos behind. Because healing isn't just about setting boundaries with others. It's about learning to stop believing the lies they told you about who you are. It's about realizing the version of you that survived wasn't unworthy. She was responding to her environment the only way she knew how. In this episode, I want to talk about what that looked like for me, how I was cast in that role, how it followed me into adulthood, and how I slowly began to unlearn it. When I was little, my father used to tell me I was bad. He'd always bring up stories from when my sibling was born. How I hid them out of jealousy, how I didn't like sharing attention. I was 3. And I remember that feeling, the confusion of wanting love but not knowing how to ask for it. Looking back, what strikes me most isn't what I did. It's that no one ever asked why. No one ever stopped to think, where is Irene learning that from? Because I wasn't born angry. I was just mirroring what I saw. The yelling, the tension, the anger that lived in every room in our home. But kids don't have that kind of awareness. All I knew was that in my house, anger had power. And somehow I became the witness and the mirror. The one who acted out what everyone else was too afraid to say out loud. They called me the bad one, and when you hear that long enough, you start to believe it. You start carrying it like proof. You tell yourself, this must be who I am. And it didn't help that my mother never showed me affection. I used to beg her for a hug, and she'd always turn me away. But I'd watch her with my sibling, the soft smiles, the way she'd brush their hair back, and something in me broke a little each time. It taught me early that love wasn't guaranteed, that some people are easier to love than others, so I stopped asking. I learned to carry that ache quietly. That kind of rejection, it gets in your bones. It changes the way you see yourself and the way you show up everywhere else. By the time I started school, I wasn't wondering what I could learn. I was wondering if I was enough. I struggled academically, and no one ever knew how hard it really was for me. I had undiagnosed ADHD and autism, and a home life that felt like walking on glass. So when I didn't do well, it just confirmed what I already believed. I'm not smart. I'm the problem. And then something happened in 8th grade that completely threw me off. It was graduation time. They were handing out awards. And I was just sitting there with the rest of my classmates, half tuned out, clapping for everyone else. And then they called my name for the English award. I froze. I was like, this has to be a mistake. I didn't move, and my friends are telling me to go. I thought they had made a mistake. I was a C student, but apparently I had scored the highest in the entire district on the essay exam. It was the first time I had ever been recognized for something good, and I didn't know how to take it in. It didn't fit the story I'd been told about myself. The bad one doesn't win awards. So I kind of just brushed it off. I told myself it was luck or a fluke. Because when you grow up being the scapegoat, even good things feel suspicious. You don't trust them or yourself. Looking back, I can see how that belief shaped everything. Most of my friendships and relationships mirrored the same dynamic. I tolerated a lot of things I shouldn't have because I still believed I deserved less. What you tolerate in your family becomes the roadmap for what you tolerate in life. After high school, I joined the Navy. It wasn't some grand plan. It was just the fastest way out of my house. I didn't have the grades for a 4-year college, and honestly, I just needed to get away. Once I got there, everything started to shift. The people I met didn't see me as a scapegoat. They saw me. And one sailor, someone I'll always be grateful for, she took me under her wing. She mentored me, trained me, held me accountable, but in a way that built me up instead of breaking me down. And for the first time, I started to see myself differently. I became the youngest watch supervisor, and eventually I earned Junior Sailor of the Quarter. I loved my job, and I was good at it. It's true what they say about plants and people. Environment is everything. In the right one, you don't just survive, you start to bloom. That's when I started seeing myself differently. That's when I started unlearning the role I was given. Because I was never the bad one. I was just the one who refused to stay silent in a system that needed someone to blame. For most of my life, I thought being the scapegoat meant I was the problem. That if I was the one being blamed, there had to be something wrong with me. But what I've learned is that being blamed is not the same as being at fault. Sometimes the one who tells the truth becomes the easiest to punish. Not because they're wrong, but because their honesty threatens the system that depends on silence. I carried that role for years, long after I left the house, long after I grew up, until I realized I didn't have to play it anymore. And the thing is, it doesn't start with doing something terrible. It starts small. Maybe you speak up when you're not supposed to. Maybe you ask questions that make people uncomfortable. Maybe you cry when everyone else is pretending everything's fine. And before you even understand what's happening, you've been assigned that role. You become the difficult one, the emotional one, the one who's too much, and it sticks. Because when adults need someone to absorb all the dysfunction, when they need somewhere to put the anger, the shame, the chaos, it's almost always the truth teller who ends up being blamed for the truth they're naming. So you start to carry it quietly. You learn not to argue because somehow arguing just proves their point. You learn to soften your words, to explain yourself very carefully, to over-explain your intentions in hopes that someone will finally see you as good. But it never lands. It's like trying to convince someone who's already decided who you are. And after a while, you stop trying. You start holding it in instead. Your thoughts, your feelings, your reactions. You play small because it feels safer than being misunderstood. You convince yourself that if you can just keep the peace, if you can just stay agreeable enough, invisible enough, maybe they'll love you the way you need them to. But they never do. And the saddest part is, after a lifetime of being told you're the problem, you start to believe it. You start confusing guilt with identity. You mistake silence for peace. You tell yourself that if you can just be quiet enough, easy enough, less noticeable, maybe things will finally stop hurting. But they don't. Because the pain doesn't disappear when you hide. It turns inward. It becomes self-doubt. It becomes that inner voice that second guesses everything you say, everything you do. You start thinking, maybe it really is me. But then, if you're lucky, something shifts. Maybe you meet someone who doesn't see you through the same broken lens. Maybe it's a friend, a teacher, a mentor. Someone who mirrors something different back to you. And it feels strange at first. You don't know how to take in kindness when you've been trained to expect criticism. You don't know how to trust love when love has never felt safe before. That's where the unlearning begins. In those awkward, disorienting moments when someone sees you clearly and you don't quite know how to accept it. You want to believe them, but part of you still hears the old story playing in the background. The one that says you're not enough. And I think that's what healing really is. Learning to believe the new story more than the old one. It's giving yourself permission to be someone different from who they said you were. It's realizing that being sensitive isn't a flaw. That caring deeply isn't weakness. That speaking up doesn't make you the problem. For me, that took time. It meant revisiting painful memories, moments where I was misunderstood, where I was labeled the bad one. But it also meant learning to see that little girl differently. Not as a rebel, not as a troublemaker, but as a child who wanted to be loved and didn't know how to ask for it in a house that didn't know how to give it. Because behind every scapegoat story, there's usually a kid who was just trying to survive. And when we finally stop blaming them, we can start understanding them. And maybe start healing the parts of ourselves that believed the lie. When you grow up as a scapegoat, you learn to carry other people's pain before you even understand your own. You take on their moods, their silence, their anger, and somehow it becomes your responsibility to keep everyone okay. You learn to read the room before you walk in. You monitor the tone, volume, expression, because peace feels like something you have to earn. And for a long time, I thought that was strength. I thought anticipating everyone's needs meant I was mature. That staying quiet when I was hurt made me graceful. That shrinking myself kept the peace. But what I've learned, what healing keeps teaching me, is that peace built on silence isn't peace. It's suppression. And sooner or later, your body starts asking for the truth you've been holding back. When I started to unpack what being the scapegoat really meant, I realized it wasn't about being the bad one. It was about being the mirror. I reflected what was broken in the system. My feelings, my honesty, my reactions made other people uncomfortable because they revealed what they didn't want to see. And instead of facing it, they blamed me for it. That's the thing about truth tellers. We rarely get thanked in the moment. But here's what I know now. The scapegoat is often the cycle breaker. The one who finally says, this isn't right. The one who chooses healing over denial. The one who walks away even when it means walking alone. And that takes courage. Because breaking patterns will always look like betrayal to the people who benefit from them. Healing from that role takes time. There are days when old doubts return, when a memory sneaks in, and you wonder if maybe they were right about you. There are days when boundaries feel like guilt, when saying no tightens your chest, because part of you still feels responsible for everyone else's emotions. But then, little by little, something starts to shift. You catch yourself before you over-explain. You speak without apologizing. You notice you're no longer waiting for someone else's permission to feel peaceful. You begin to understand that you don't have to earn love through exhaustion. That being seen and being good are not the same thing. And that's the beautiful part. The part no one tells you about the scapegoat's journey. When you stop defining yourself by who you were in survival mode, you start remembering who you were before it. The kid who laughed too loud. The one who loved deeply, even when it wasn't safe. The one who spoke truth, not to be defiant, but because honesty was your way of reaching for connection. That version of you is still there. The one who never stopped trying to be understood. And healing, real healing, is giving that version of you space to exist again. You begin to understand that you don't have to prove you're worthy. You don't have to rewrite history to deserve peace. You just have to come home to yourself, to your softness, to your truth, to the parts that were labeled too much, when really, they were just you. And I think that's what this journey is. Not about forgetting where you came from, but remembering who you were before you were blamed for everything broken around you. So if you've ever been called dramatic, sensitive, emotional, difficult, I hope you hear this and feel seen, because those are often the same traits that make you intuitive, empathetic, strong, the same traits that help you recognize patterns, set boundaries, and stop pretending. You are never the bad one. You were the one brave enough to notice the truth. You were the one who refused to keep living in denial. You were the one who stopped pretending pain was normal. There was never purpose in the pain, but there is meaning in the healing that came after. Choosing to face what others denied became the way I began to rewrite my family story. Because every time you choose honesty over approval, every time you choose rest over performance, every time you choose self-trust over people-pleasing, you're rewriting the story. And that story, the one where you stop carrying what was never yours, that's where freedom begins. You're not who they said you were. You never were. You were just the one who saw the truth too soon. And now you're the one strong enough to live it. If this episode brought something up for you, take a moment to breathe. You don't have to rush to make sense of it. Sometimes healing begins with simply seeing yourself differently, without the labels, without the guilt, without the old story echoing in your head. Because the truth is, you were never meant to live your whole life trying to prove your worth to people who couldn't see it. You were never meant to carry everyone else's shame just to keep the peace. You get to outgrow that version of yourself that was built in survival. You get to be seen in your wholeness now. You've spent years believing you were the problem. I hope this reminded you that you were reacting to a problem that existed long before you. And that's what healing really is. Not rewriting the past, but reclaiming the truth of who you've always been underneath it all. Because healing doesn't erase the past. It changes the way you carry it. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need it. And take a moment to leave a review wherever you listen. Your review helps more people find the podcast and reminds others they're not alone. Don't forget to subscribe or follow the show so you never miss an episode. You can also join me on Substack, where I share weekly reflections and gentle reminders to help you feel less alone on your healing journey. You'll find the link in the show notes. If you'd like to connect beyond the podcast, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Born Tired Podcast. I'd love to hear what resonated with you. And if you'd like to support the podcast, there's a link there to buy me a coffee. Thank you for being here, for listening with an open heart. Most of all, remember this. Your story matters, your voice matters, and you are not alone. This episode was written and narrated by Irene Torres. Audio production by Carlos Torres. Original music composed by Carlos Torres.